Well, this morning as we continue our sermon series on heroes, this is a very unlikely hero. Remember that I'm picking some of the more obscure Bible topics here, right? And this morning we're going to be hearing, this is the only time you're going to hear this in the Bible, we're going to be hearing about a talking donkey. So listen up. Then the Israelites traveled to the plains of Moab and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified because there were so many people. Indeed, Moab was filled with dread because of the Israelites. The Moabites said to the elders of Midian, "This horde is going to lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field." So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor near the river in his native land. And Balak said, "A people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on these people because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps then I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the country. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed." The elders of Moab and Midian left, taking with them the fee for divination. And when they came to Balaam, they told him what Balak had said. "Spend the night here," Balaam said to them, "and I will bring you back the answer the Lord gives me." So the Moabite princes stayed with him, and God came to Balaam and asked, "Who are these men with you?" Balaam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. A people that has come out of Egypt covers the face of the land. Now come and put a curse on them for me. Perhaps then I will be able to fight them and drive them away." But God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You must not put a curse on those people because they are blessed." The next morning Balaam got up and said to Balak's princes, "Go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." So the Moabite princes returned to Balak and said, "Balaam refused to come with us." Then Balak sent other princes, more numerous and more distinguished than the first. They came to Balaam and said, "This is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Do not let anything keep you from coming to me, because I will reward you handsomely and do whatever you say. Come and put a curse on these people for me." But Balaam answered them, "Even if Balak gave me his palace filled with silver and gold, I could not do anything, great or small, to go beyond the command of the Lord my God. Now stay here tonight as the others did, and I will find out who else the Lord will tell me." At night God came to Balaam and said, "Since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but only do what I tell you." Balaam got up in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. But God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat her to get her back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between two vineyards, with walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it, so he beat her again. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and he was angry and beat her with his staff. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?" Balaam answered the donkey, "You have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" "No," he said. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face forward. The angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times?" I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared her." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned. I didn't realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now, if you are displeased, I will go back." The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but speak only what I tell you." So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moab town on the Arnon border at the edge of his territory. And Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send you an urgent summons? Why didn't you come to me? Am I really not able to reward you?" "Well, I have come to you now," Balaam replied, but can I say just anything? I must speak only what the Lord puts in my mouth." Then Balaam went with Balak to Kiriatha-Hozoth. Balak sacrificed cattle and sheep and gave some to Balaam and the princes who were with him. The next morning Balak took Balaam up to Bamoth Baal, and from there he saw part of the people. All right, here are a couple to make you giggle. You ready? "I waited and stayed up all night and tried to figure out where the sun was. Then it dawned on me." "Why can't you hear a pterodactyl go to the bathroom?" "Because the P is silent." Thank you, Marlis. Ooh, should have the drum this morning. Okay, have you heard about corduroy pillows? They're making headlines. What did the green grape say to the blue grape? "Breathe, breathe." Here's one last one. This one's funny to me. What do Alexander the Great and Winnie the Pooh have in common? The same middle name. Get it? The ha 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 ha. Okay, that one wasn't as funny. Okay. Well, today we are studying what I think is one of the funniest stories in the Bible. Now, who can keep from giggling as they read of Balaam arguing with his donkey? And we know that who wins? The donkey. Now, the story of Balaam in the book of Numbers provides us, I think, with a case study of a false prophet who seeks to curse Israel, but who can only pronounce blessings upon God's people. There are some very important lessons here, and let's listen well to the story and look to the Holy Spirit to teach us from this fascinating text, because I believe in this one, the hero in this story is really God speaking through the donkey. Now, let's take just a minute to set up the book of Numbers. It begins with the Israelites at Mount Sinai, and preparing to possess the promised land, they send out, remember this? They send out 12 men to spy on the land, and 10 of the guys go, "I don't know, I don't think we can take them, I don't think we should do it." And because of that, the Israelites, they rebel against God, they refuse to attack the Canaanites, and that leads to God's judgment. What do they get 40 years of? Wandering around in the desert, okay, until virtually all of them die. And then this second generation of Israelites, they set off toward Moab, which is going to be the launching pad to get them into the land of Canaan. And when they come to the wilderness of Zin and they find no water, the people begin to grumble, as they have 5,000 times in this story. Moses is instructed to speak to the rock to produce water, but in anger, Moses takes a stick and he hits the rock to produce water. And for that act of irreverence, Moses is forbidden to enter the promised land too. And this is the end of an important chapter in Israel's history. This chapter starts with the Exodus, of course, and it concludes with the death of that generation of Israelites who fail to obey and to trust their God. And this final section of Numbers deals with the second generation of Israelites as they prepare to enter and possess the land of Canaan. And that's where we find Balaam. Now, what a sight it must have been for the Moabites to look out, and they see this innumerable hosts of Israelites, and they're lurking just a little too close to their land. And they're aware of what the Israelites had done to prevail over people who had opposed them along the way. Still, we think, why are the Moabites frightened? Well, maybe you remember that the Ammonites and the Moabites are offspring of Lot. Remember, this is not a great story. Abraham's nephew Lot, he flees. Remember this story? His wife is turned into a pillar of salt. His daughters say, "Hey, let's have children with our father, and so they do. And so they're related to the Israelites here. Now, you may notice that they don't mention being afraid of war or slaughter. What they're afraid of is the Israelites coming in and eating up all their natural resources, leaving less for themselves. Now, Israel was to be a source of blessing to the world, including the Moabites, and yet they fear the presence of the Israelites so much that they're going to hire a guy to put a curse on the Israelites. Their aim was to weaken this great nation by cursing them so that they would be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. Now, I have no doubt that there were all kinds of soothsayers in those days, but there seemed to be one guy that was top of his field. He's highly regarded as a prophet who can bless or curse with his words, and his name is Balaam. Now, although he lives among many idolaters, he claims to have great knowledge of God. Now, as we go on, I think we can confidently conclude that he was neither a true prophet, nor, I don't even think, a believer in God. Now, I don't think he was a true fraud either, because if his cursing was in vain, then why did God forbid him to do it? I don't think his powers came from above, but from below. And Balaam is connected, but not to the God of Israel. Now, notice when Balak summons Balaam, he doesn't bother to tell him who he wants a curse put on him. He doesn't tell him that Israel came out of Egypt 40 years earlier, or how this great exodus came to pass. He doesn't mention the covenant God made with Abraham. He doesn't bother to tell Balaam that the Israelites had destroyed those who opposed him along their way. He just reveals his plan to defeat the Israelites. And he says, "For I know that whomever you bless is blessed, and whomever you curse is cursed." Now, think about this for a second, because it really ought to blow us away. Balaam's words immediately bring to mind the words of God in the covenant with Abraham. Remember when God says that to Abraham, and he says, "I'm the person who does the blessing and the curses." That's God's job, to bless and curse. And God says, "I've already pronounced a blessing on my nation Israel." So the only question here is, are the Moabites and the Midianites going to be blessed or cursed themselves? That's going to depend on how they treat the nation of Israel. Those who bless Israel are going to be blessed. Those who curse Israel are going to be cursed. And Balak's plan to curse Israel is destined to bring a curse upon himself. So they set out on this long journey. They've got money in hand. They get there, and Balaam's like, "Oh, I don't know." He says, "I'm going to ask the Lord about your offer." Now, this is incredible. When you really pull back and look at it, it's an incredible thing, because Balaam uses the particular name for the God of Israel. He knows who Balak is talking about. And so, stripped to its essentials, he basically said something like this: Yahweh, saying the personal name of God. "There's a group of guys here who've asked me to go with them so I can curse these people. Would that be all right with you?" Now who thinks that is a stupid thing to ask God? Is it okay if I curse your people? What do you think the answer is going to be? No, right? Balaam acts like he doesn't know this curse is for the Israelites, but I believe that he does, and that's incredible. Now, the first thing God says to Balaam is, "Who are these guys with you?" Now, how many of us think God knew who they were? Yeah. So you say, why does God ask a question in which he already knows the answer? Have you ever done that with your own children? What do you say to them? Just, "What do you think you're doing?" Oh my gosh, it's like I talked to Peggy and Marlis here. I've got all the right answers. Just, what do you think you're doing? When you ask your children that question, do you know what they were doing? Yeah, you do. But we want to see what? Whether they're going to tell the truth or whether they're going to make excuses. Yes, I was disassembling the washing machine, or what's the other side of the answer? I was doing, I don't know. Or did you have that mystery person live in your house? Somebody else did it. I don't know. It wasn't me. Yeah, it wasn't me. I had no idea about that. But I think what a fool Balaam is. These men are seeking to persuade him to curse the very people God has blessed. Do you see what a stupid move that is? No wonder God rebukes Balaam for having these men as his house guests. Now, Balaam doesn't come clean with God and tell all. Did he think God didn't know it all? God forbade him to go with these people, and God said, "Do not curse the Israelites," saying, if you didn't get it before, these are my people. They are people I blessed. Now, Balaam is not a truth teller here because he doesn't tell his guests this whole story either. He doesn't tell them God forbade him to do what they were attempting to hire him to do. He just says, God refused to give me permission to go with you. Now, those answers are similar but different in intensity. To say, I refuse to let you go with this person is a lot different than saying, I'm forbidden to do what you want me to do. Do you see the difference there? And God's will is emphatically stated, and it's crystal clear. Again, the truth here that's never said is the Israelites could not be cursed by anybody because God had already blessed them. You'd think it was all over. Balak had made Balaam a tempting offer, but God had forbidden him to accept it. But Balak refuses to take no for an answer, and he says, name your own price. And at first Balaam says, there's no way I can be persuaded, and yet he lets them spend the night. Now, from my perspective, I don't know what you're seeing here, but it seems to me that Balaam is trying to manipulate everybody. We'd say he was playing both ends against the middle, wouldn't we? Because see, I don't think he gets at all the sovereignty of God. Remember, the pagan gods, and I say that with a little g there, were thought to be open to manipulation by persistent and extreme measures. You ever seen a parent watch somebody in Dollar General? Okay? You tell your child, no, you can't have a candy bar. And the child looks at them and they do what? Their hand goes out, what happens? Their hand goes out and they take the candy bar. And the parent just kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, oh, well, I don't know what I can do about it. And so, and we laugh, don't we? Because we're like, oh, we're the parents. We could do a lot about it, right? We're the ones with the money, are we not? To pay for the candy bar. But when the child is allowed to, you say no, and the child grabs it, and you pay for it anyway, what does the child learn? The child means that no really isn't no. And that Balaam seems to think of God the same way. Now, once again, God comes to him in the night, and he says, if the men come to call on him, he's to go up and get with them, but he has to do only that which God says. It seems like God is changing his mind, but we know God does not. But we're going to see God's sovereignty reign. Now, picture this in your head. Can you see this big procession? And I can see Balaam, and he's got his two servants, and he's got the dignitaries, and he's waving to everybody, you know what I mean? Like waving out the window going, look at how wonderful I am to all his friends, you know? Hi, I'm with them, right? And what he couldn't see was that by going with them, he made God his adversary. Now this is incredibly interesting. The Hebrew word translated oppose here is literally transliterated Satan. Whoa. To deliberately and purposely oppose the will of God is to make God your adversary. And as they make their way to Moab, the angel of the Lord stands in the path of Balaam and his donkey. And if Balak sent his most noble princes to entice Balaam to come to him, God sends his most awesome emissary to oppose his coming. Now this is funny here, I think, even though it's very serious. And I think Balaam is so concerned with status and privilege. Okay, it's funny. Imagine him riding on this donkey, okay? He's riding along. He's got control of, not only is he's supposed to have control of his animal, and he has control of the gods, remember? But he can't even get this donkey to go where he wants. So imagine these other people watching him lose control of himself. He beats his animal 3 times, and don't you think it would have been funny to the princess when they see the donkey lay down? The donkey literally lays on the ground, so he's got to get up and beat the animal until she gets to her feet. Now, the next part is amazing too, because doesn't it seem incredible? Wouldn't you be amazed if an animal talked to you? You'd be like, am I not sleeping enough? What's going on here? But it doesn't make much of an impression on Balaam. He hardly appears to notice the donkey's talking to him, and the donkey basically says, don't you get it? Have I ever acted like this before? If I have not acted this way before, don't you get that something extraordinary is going on here? Balaam, remember, remember, Balaam is a seer. He's a prophet. He is supposed to be in touch with the spiritual forces, especially those on the dark side. He is supposed to see and speak to people about what he saw. But he can't see the angel of the Lord, but the donkey can, and the donkey speaks to Balaam, rebuking him for his sin. Do you see that the donkey is a better seer than Balaam? No, that's pretty funny. And no prophet it reminds us that no prophet should ever attempt to take credit for what he sees, because God says, hey, I can speak through anybody. I can speak through a donkey if I want to. No, it's only now that Balaam's eyes are open so he can actually see the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and he falls on his face in front of the angel of the Lord. And the angel says, what reason do you have for beating your donkey? The angel says, I came here to oppose you because what you're doing is perverse. The donkey is a better seer than you are. She saw me and turned back these 3 times. This was to save you from certain death. Had she continued on, I would have killed you and let her live. You were about to kill her for saving your life. Now think about this for a second. If Balaam's words to the donkey could kill, that donkey would have been dead, because he cursed the donkey, right? So if his words were powerful, the donkey should have just conked over and been dead. That's not what happened. He cursed the donkey, but yet the donkey was the only reason that Balaam was not killed by the angel of the Lord. Balaam was cursing his one and only source of blessing. Wow. Balaam cursed and would have killed the instrument of his deliverance. And we say to ourselves, is the connection between this incident and what Balaam is seeking to do clear? God had promised to bless Israel and make Israel a source of blessing to all who treated his people with favor. And by seeking to turn God's blessing into a curse, Balaam was bringing a curse upon himself. By seeking to curse those whom God had blessed, Balaam was against those who God was for. Now you notice, wisely at least, Balaam can think of no excuse that will adequately explain or justify his actions. He does admit his sin, but personally, I don't think he really owns up to it, because, okay, now he says something else stupid. He says, well, I can go back home if it's evil in the angel's sight. And we say, really? If it is. And instead of ordering Balaam to go back home, the angel says, go with the men, but speak only that which God gives you to say. And once again, Balaam is on his way to Balak, but his mission is going to produce the opposite of what the Moabites want, and nothing like what Balaam hopes for. Now, we say, what a story. Well, what do we learn from this? There's like tons of lessons here. I'm going to tell you, you're lucky you didn't get the whole sermon. At one point, I'm like, okay, you have too much stuff here. Condense it. But this is the lessons I see in it, and I think our hero, the donkey, shows us one major lesson is God's in charge. When God speaks, do not try to manipulate him. Do not think that you are going to use God for your good. Instead, God is always the one who uses us, and God says, if you're not going to be helpful as a person, I can use anything or anybody I want, including a donkey. Now, if you got anything from this, I think it's easy to see what a fool Balaam was, and yet many Christians seek to use God rather than to serve him. We try to convince God that our happiness is greater than his holiness, that our pleasures are more important than pleasing him. Now, the other thing, I think Balaam is so foolish. He's like a little kid. He tries to convince God that he's a great guy. Okay, God knows what we're like. He knows our character. He knows our hearts better than we know ourselves. And more like the gentle donkey and less like Balaam, let's seek God's voice and follow it. When others are tempt you to curse or harm others, even if great reward is offered, consider the reward you already have in Jesus Christ. Think through Jesus' teachings and make your choices based on the voice that is trustworthy. You know, we didn't read further, but if you read further in Numbers, you're going to see that Balaam paid a very high price for his sin. He's going to die in later chapter here. So I think let us choose instead to listen to God's voice and to obey him above all. Amen.